Hello, my name is Michael Bell. I'm the CEO and president of R Squared, a company that focuses on implementing technological solutions to mitigate compliance risks. I have with me today Carolyn Bruguera, Vice President and General Counsel of Hansen Medical and former Vice President and General Counsel of Micrus Endovascular Corporation. We previously presented on evidencing strong internal controls to reduce global anti-corruption risks, and this is somewhat of a postscript to that presentation. In this session, we're going to talk to Carolyn about her experience in dealing with this situation directly. As the General Counsel and Vice President of Micrus Endovascular, she helped lead a company through the aftermath of an FCPA investigation and settlement, including developing a global compliance program and strong internal controls while under the tight scrutiny of a federal monitor. Carolyn, let's talk a little bit about this. In rolling out your program, where did you start?
Well, the first thing we had to do was figure out what kinds of interactions the company was engaged in that might trigger scrutiny, and then ensure that we had a process in place that we could demonstrate included review of those transactions at the home office, regardless of where they were taking place.
So when deciding on how to approach regional and country-specific variances in laws and customs and norms, and looking at the competing aspect of trying to do things consistently and globally, what were your decision factors and how did you approach addressing these various differences in regions and countries?
We decided to take a global approach for two reasons. One is that we're a small company and people wear a lot of hats, so anybody who's operating overseas is likely to be working in more than one jurisdiction. But we also felt that from an ethical standpoint, a global approach was more defensible to our monitor and to the rest of the world.
Excellent. With the FCPA, a big focus on the compliance aspects, of course, is the prevention of bribery. But a big section here is the internal controls and the books and records requirements. Can you talk a little bit about how you went about evidencing strong compliance with those expectations?
And I think evidence is a really important term there because we felt from the get-go that we had a strong, in the post-settlement phase of the company, we had very strong culture, strong ethical culture, strong commitment at the top. But what we found as we were reviewing, auditing, monitoring, and presenting information to our monitor was that sometimes the email threads and files don't all document fairly and adequately the commitment that you really have in place. So one of the considerations that emerged very early was the need to make sure that we could actually demonstrate easily who had reviewed and signed off on a transaction, that we could document the transaction, or that we could demonstrate that we had documented the transaction and easily retrieve those documents, and that payments had been reviewed against the contract and the initial approval for compliance with the approved transaction. And this proved, even in a small company, much more challenging than we had originally anticipated.
So from a real tactical level, we were fortunate enough at R Squared to work with Micrus to help install some of these internal controls. In that regard, and you were very instrumental on fitting the solution to your own processes and organizational challenges. But what were the greatest challenges for you in rolling out this system of controls across the globe?
Well, as I mentioned, we didn't have a problem getting buy-in at the top. That was a given. And fairly quickly we were able to get buy-in throughout the organization through training and frequent communication. The real challenge that we found, and it was really a phase 2 for our compliance program, was because as we audited and monitored under the initial program, we found that it was often very difficult to piece together, for example, a payment that you might have in your records with the initial approval, with the contract. And so the point that you got involved, Mike, is when we were looking for solutions that would make it easy for us to demonstrate to third parties or internally that we had taken all the steps that our compliance program mandated.
And that's even with a smaller company. With a big company, I mean, is it your opinion now that companies can really manage this manually, or is electronic or technology, compute web-based solutions imperative at this point?
I would say that with the way global operations already work and the electronic communications that we rely on so heavily, that a paper-based process is virtually impossible, especially when you're operating out of multiple offices and across multiple time zones.
With this experience behind you, what will you take into your new organization? What would you recommend to to viewers of this video as to what they should be focusing on? What are some of the common pitfalls to avoid, and what other things can they do to maximize the benefit of their efforts?
Well, first of all, I think that you should go into this with the assumption that you can and will get everybody on board to make the program a success. I think that having consistent policies and procedures that you apply globally is probably the most important takeaway from my experience, and making sure that, as I mentioned, that you're actually able to document that you've taken every step. So having a system in place that consistently documents all those steps from the beginning is really critical.
Carolyn, thank you very much. For those of you who are looking for more information on internal controls and the requirements under the FCPA or anti-bribery laws, please visit www.r2ss.com. Thank you.